Welcome to the Sthenics and Strength Podcast. I'm Josh. You may know me from Strength Side. I'm here with Denis from Sthenics. What's going on today, Denis?
All good. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm excited to talk about combining calisthenics and lifting because it's a really smart thing to do. Sometimes our minds really make polarizing decisions, like I want to be a calisthenics guy or I want to be a lifting bodybuilder guy, but I've always found it really cool to combine different things, and it seems to serve people really well. And I know that's a big topic for you because that's how you train all of your calisthenics athletes. So let's dive in. What do you think about mixing the two?
When I started calisthenics, to maybe put a personal spin in it, it was like this pure body weight sport. You didn't touch weights. Like, not even weighted calisthenics wasn't even big. It was like, you touch weight, you don't do calisthenics anymore. When people were posting stuff online, like their physiques, they always wrote in the description, like, without using weights. And if somebody did some curls to get there, they were already cheating. It was like not the way to go.
So it was like a status symbol to say like purely body weight.
Purely body weight, 100% body weight. It's like 100% natural almost. With time, of course, the sport changing into, it's mostly the weighted calisthenics scene. The skills way less, but the weighted calisthenics scene, 1RM muscle up, 1RM pull up, 1RM dip, and 1RM squat, takes programming out of powerlifting. And powerlifting, especially in the last years with the rise of power building, let's say, and this more hybrid training approach, does mix bodybuilding and powerlifting. And the same thing happened for street lifting already quite early when training myself and when training other people. I noticed that calisthenics, as awesome as it is, it has some exercises and some movements that have a high barrier of entry. The pull-up, for example, or the pike push-up, for example. They're not exercises where everyone can just go and do them out of nowhere. There are ways to accommodate resistance to make them easier for you, changing the incline, using loop bands, but it's very difficult to keep these things 100% objective. Or ring rows, like ring height, and so always having the same setup, it can be meticulous to do it. And it's just easier to use weights in these occasions. One big entry for me to program them was it just makes things easier. And until you learn the technique and you have a technical component to an exercise and a specific component to an exercise where you do the exercise in some sort of way that you have to do, you're already learning it. And the big bulk of the work, the actual volume, the muscle building, which does need to happen, happens in more objective and easier exercises.
That's a really interesting point that you make, that not everyone can just hop into pull-ups and pike push-ups, even though those are like awesome, really bang for your buck exercises that we're going to get into a little bit more. There needs to be a certain base that's built up to do those things for a lot of people. If you had to like give a time frame, how long does it take to build up to being able to just have pull-ups as your main work or just have pike push-ups as your main work?
Difficult question, because it does depend a lot on your body weight and training history. If your body weight is, of course, on the higher side and you need to go through a very long cut to make it, of course, easier for you to pull up your own body weight. Pulling up 100 kgs is way harder than pulling up 60 or 70 or whatever it is. That, of course, takes quite a while. In general, when training beginners that want to learn their first pull-up, I feel like that time frame from 4 to 6 months for most is actually very, very realistic to achieve the first pull-up. And the first pull-up is really the key to doing more. Once you get that first one down, it becomes so much easier to put more on, because you can train it specifically now. You can do volume in this exercise. This really opens up the door to an extremely effective exercise, motivating exercise to hit your back muscles.
Let's give an example of someone. Actually, I have a buddy right now who can do one good pull-up, two kind of, he's probably carrying a little bit more body weight than he would like to. So for someone like this, I imagine it's good to build up those single reps of pull-ups. But then you also want to do some other things on the side to keep those numbers going up.
We could design a session where, let's say, one pull-up is always very solid and very consistent. That's of course important. If the pull-up still isn't consistent, so on a good day you hit it and it looks okay, but on a bad day you might not. You're not ready to program it in your training. So very important for you to know and understand. But if it's possible to do a nice single and with a 2 to 3 minute break, do another single, you can accumulate singles over time. So you do one rep, you take a break, quite a long one, 2 minutes, you do another one, you do another one. And every week, maybe you start with 3 singles. Every week, you can add a set to those. This is your super specific technical work, and it needs to be high quality. So the breaks need to be long enough, and you should be able to recover from them. Still, you should be able to add one set every single week. Adding one set is way easier in this case than adding one rep. That would make it impossible very quickly. Your back off work to still collect specific work in this exercise could be some banded pull-ups, where you do 2 sets, for example, 2 to 3 sets. That will be very individual how much you do with a band that allows you to stay in a slightly higher rep range that you want to reach in the near future. So between the 4 and the 10 reps, which you can cycle through over time. So a bit higher maybe in the first month, a bit lower rep range in the second month, but you use a lighter loop band to slowly increase intensity there. The third exercise in this session would be higher volume work for your lat muscles, where you use ring rows or you use a lat pull down to make sure that you're actually getting close to failure. You don't work only technically on this lift, and you actually get some sets done that are close enough to failure and have a good intensity on the target musculature to make your muscle grow and to get stronger as well, of course.
Yeah, so I think that's really valuable for someone who, let's say they're mostly doing bodybuilding work, but they want to start getting into calisthenics a little bit more. They're a little bit on the heavier side, to start to treat your pull-ups kind of as your skill work a little bit. Put it in the beginning of your session. Maybe you're working it with those singles, or maybe you can do 4 reps, so you're doing some doubles, something like that, but you're keeping away from failure. But then you're still doing all that good muscle building work after, with things like lat pull downs, even things like rows. You're still hopefully stimulating your back a lot, getting close to failure. And this isn't just the way to train for someone who's on that lower end. Maybe you could describe people who that you train that are a bit more advanced and, on the higher level of skill.
We can take you as an example.
Oh, stop it.
Actually, a very, very great example how you could go about it. In your case, the technical work is one-arm pull-up work. Heavy singles is not even the right definition of it, because they still have enough margin that you could do 1 more rep usually, or even 2. So they're easy enough on the tendons and on the joints, where you do variation of, in your case now, hand on biceps, one-arm pull-up that feels easy, moves well, and is this technical single to prime you for the specific one-arm work. And then you move on to heavier pull-up work, where you do 3 to 4 sets in different rep ranges depending on the mesocycle you're in. So these can be on the higher side, 6 to 8 reps, or quadruples, triples, doubles, or even singles in certain mesocycles, where depending on the week, the intensity, so the reps in reserve are a tiny bit different. In the beginning, of course, we try to keep a tiny bit more margin. Towards the end of this mesocycle, so this month of training, will go a tiny bit closer to failure. Weights are going to go up from week to week. So here, the loading is done more traditionally through adding load, while in a beginner, it's in the beginning mostly about through adding more reps, because adding load is not possible at that point. The intensity is regulated by reps there, and here by load. And then we go into a third exercise, usually, that does hit some weak points that we have noticed over time in a certain way, or just purely for aesthetic reasons, or just purely to make sure that we get enough volume in your back muscles. These can be quite fancy variations like one-arm lat pull downs, where we hit the vertical lat fibers more, especially if we're working
that's
with
what
a
I'm doing right
pronated
now.
grip. All these exercises, if done mindfully, and that I think is the big difference and the beautiful focus of this sport, scapula and how you think about exercises. It's not just about A to B, it's about how do I move from A to B? What do I use to move from A to B? Which you find in bodybuilding more and more, of course. The difference between a bodybuilder that can lat pull down the whole stack and then can't do a pull up, and a calisthenics athlete which has never touched a lat pull down can do the whole stack at lower body weight, but can do pull ups with a lot of extra weight, is simply how they've learned to coordinate and how they've learned to activate. So neurologically.
Being a guy who likes calisthenics, I always love that distinction of that a lot of the time it's a one-way ship, that if you really focus on your body weight movements and getting good at activations and controlling your scapula, then you a lot of the time will be able to go push weights naturally, but it doesn't always work out the other way. Actually, a lot of the time it doesn't. This is kind of becoming the pull-up episode in a sense, but I get a question from a lot of people. What is the rep range that you need to be in with body weight pull-ups before you start adding weight, right? If you can say do 5 pretty solid body weight pull-ups, could you start adding weight, or is it best to wait until you're more in the 10 rep range? How do you see that?
I hate to give these numbers because I've seen so many different scenarios.
I think that's good to make that distinction, though, is that it's going to vary for everybody. And there's different types of people that are going to respond better to different things. So this is just purely speculation and ranges that we're talking here.
In general, one thing that is always true is the more margin you have built, the better it is. Starting later with putting on weights is not bad. Starting too late might leave progress on the table. The reason for this is that some people are particularly strong in certain rep ranges and aren't in others, even just with a bench. You might have noticed that until 6 reps, you can easily add weight, for example, on the bar every single week. But in the 8 rep range, your drop off in weight that you can use is very, very high. It might get drastically lower on 10 reps and drastically lower on 12 reps. And this means that you would be, if you try to get to a certain rep range, if you want to get, like, very often 12 or 15 is this magical number every influencer tells you to need to reach. Like, before you put 1 gram on your pull-ups, you need to reach 15 pull-ups. And 15 pull-ups is already a very, very specific rep range to be into. So you're going more in the direction of metabolist build up in your forearms. You go more into the grip strength range. You go more into, for some, even lactate threshold range, where they can't use the muscle in this way anymore. So it becomes more endurance training in some way. It is specific to itself. And if you don't care about that, it doesn't even matter having 15 reps. You might be able to already load with an 8 to 10 rep range. And honestly, if you can do 3 sets of 8 reps of pull-ups, I've seen cases where most, let's say, general population, if you take a Gaussian curve, 8 reps, three sets of 8 reps, you can probably do 1 set of 6 reps with 2.5 kg added, that's 5 pounds, with the same form. For each 5 pounds, they cost you about 2 reps until a 6 rep range. After the 6 rep range, the changes become dramatic, and singles compared to triples becomes more dramatic as well. And here it really depends on each person. I can take myself as an example. I am extremely strong in a 4 to 8 rep range. The weights I move in the pull-up in a 4 to 8 rep range are numbers that most people...
Elite.
Yeah, most, like, elite not, but close to, like, they can do 90 kg plus pull-ups. And my 1RM is way, way lower than that. So I'm very strong in these rep ranges, and I'm very weak in especially the 1RM. Until 3RM, I'm quite decent. That's something that can be trained. It needs to be trained, but It has a lot to do with your training history, muscle fiber distribution, genetics, yada, yada.
So you mentioned loading with 2.5 kg, 5 pounds. Is that like the lowest you'd go with loading 5 pounds on somebody? Or would you go lower than that? Or do you like to start with maybe 5 kgs, loading 10 pounds?
I find loading 2.5 kgs, at least for the first week or the first weeks, a good starting point. Honestly, lower than that is body weight fluctuation most of the time. These micro plate loading makes sense to hit a PR in like for yourself or in a competition. And some exercises like the muscle up, you might load only 0.25 kgs, so around, 3 pounds, or pike push-ups, for example, or handstand push-ups. But in general, I wouldn't go lower than that. Never forget, you don't need to add this weight to all your sets. You can do one top set, 1 times 6 times 2.5 kgs, and then 2 sets of 6 reps with 0 kgs. And the next week, you can do 2 sets and then 3 sets with this weight. So it doesn't need to be this aggressive. And especially with body weight exercises, like having a slower progression, looking that your form stays constant is super important.
Keeping the quality high, right? Because sometimes when you add weight, it's like, sure, you could squeeze out those 6 reps, but we're doing some kipping and barely getting our chin over the bar and whatnot. So yeah, that's a good distinction. So I want to dive into, we'll kind of zoom out from more technical programming and pull-ups and stuff. And let's just talk about someone that is in the gym doing more of a bodybuilding style training, or even more of a powerlifting style training. They want to add in some calisthenics. What are the movements that like make the most sense, right? Because spoiler alert, unless you're really interested in an L-sit, that might not be like the place to start, right? What are like the compound calisthenics movements that are really valuable, high bang for your buck?
The pull-up, obviously. So
Yep.
won't talk about that anymore today. The pike push-up is very underrated and a super
Yeah.
cool exercise. What people forget, or nobody outside of Sthenics I've seen doing, is loading them. And loading them is possible, and it's not even like, it might feel awkward with a belt in the beginning, but once you get used to them, it's awesome. And it's an exercise that you can first load by simply putting your feet a tiny bit higher, secondly by adding depth through parallettes or a box, and later on, or already before, going full range of motion, so doing it deeper by adding weight to it. And that's a beautifully linear process, an exercise that hits your front delt so well, that teaches you a lot of scapular stability in some part, like learning to stabilize with your lats, preparing you for something like the handstand push-up, and just hits the front delts extremely well as an exercise, and the triceps.
Overhead pressing isn't a power lift technically, but most power lifters do it. If you look at any strongman competitions and whatnot, there's always lifts overhead. It's one of the exercises that you can do that's going to recruit so much strength from your body, especially when you're standing and stabilizing that. So to do it in a closed chain fashion really makes sense. And I'll add that it will just take some time to get things right, to get your setup right. You got to play with that a little bit. I can throw some clips on screen of maybe my first time you having me do elevated full range pike push-ups. It looks terrible. Like I had no, spatial awareness, but then a clip of where I am now, say 6 months later, night and day difference, right? So there is a bit of skill acquisition there and getting your setup right. But once you have it, like Denis said, it's a powerful movement, man. Like you're really having to engage everything in your upper body, and it's really hitting those front delts nicely.
Good point you made, like about powerlifting and still doing overhead pressing. It's a great movement to overload the triceps in a big way to help you in the lockout in the bench or things like that. You can do it simply for that, and it's still a great exercise. Of course, a military press works as well, but here you learn a cool skill at the same time, especially if you aim to do handstand push-ups in the future.
When would you have somebody start doing handstand push-ups on the wall? I mean, I guess that can be what we're training for, right? And it is the similar, maybe progression. I don't know if you'd consider it a progression, but
Yeah, I would consider it a progression for sure. So handstand push-up on the wall I think there's a big differentiation between back to wall and belly to wall. The back to wall, actually, you can start quite early on. And it's super good, especially for the lockout and the triceps. It's way less technical, which is a great point as well. These probably you can start quite early. So if you can already do quite a few pike push-ups, the thing about the back to wall handstand push-up is a lot about learning the right setup. So a few things to focus on is go wide enough with your hands. It's not a handstand push-up in the classical sense. It's way wider. Get very close to the wall. Don't look to the floor, but look back, so to say, and don't touch with your forehead, but touch with the top of the head. With these three things in mind, you probably even are able to do one or two already.
And this is in more of a vertical path than the handstand
Exactly.
push-up with the chest
Exactly.
facing the wall. Yeah. Okay.
It's a bit like the second part of the military press or a wider military press where your elbows in the front and less front delt recruitment. You will recruit a tiny bit more of side delts and you will recruit quite a lot of triceps. But it won't help you much to learn the handstand push-up technique-wise. So rather see it as like almost a tricep push down almost. The belly to wall would be the natural progression of the pike push up, which is way more technical, which I don't like to overload by doing a lot of reps, but rather to do very similar to the pull up we mentioned before, do singles up maybe to triples in this case, where we work very much on technique, focus on all the little details, keep enough margin rather than just trying to bash out volume, because there's a lot of ways you can compensate it, and thinking about all those things at the same time becomes very challenging, and there it's easier to use another exercise to do so, like the
Like the
pike
pike
push-ups.
push-up.
So exactly. Ta-da!
Full circle, yeah. Someone who wants to focus on calisthenics more could potentially add in some pike push-ups with military press, or they could replace military press. If you really had a big goal of getting a handstand push-up, you could do technical handstand push-up work on the wall. You could then do some pike push-ups after to get some volume, and you could even throw in a little military press after that.
Or maybe regarding military press, instead of using a barbell, you can use dumbbells and you can keep your elbows a tiny bit more in front of the body. Simply, it mimics the movement of the pike push-up a tiny bit more. So one mistake a lot of people make that want to learn the pike push-up, they go into the gym, they take maybe the dumbbells and they perform the movement like in a completely frontal plane, and rather like bring your elbows forward in a sagittal plane so that you can mimic the movement a tiny bit more, and that will give you so much more transferred at the end of the day because the movement pattern is more similar and you will put more muscle on the front delt.
That's a cool kind of difference between a handstand push-up press and, for instance, a lot of people do seated dumbbell presses in the gym like this, right? And
Yeah.
maybe you've built that up really strong. Maybe you could do 70s, for good amount of reps there. But then when you try to get in this handstand push-up range, is completely different, right? And yes, this will have a little bit of carryover, right? Those muscles are still involved, but there has to be some time learning that new technique, I think.
It's probably one whole episode. A good point to make, since we're talking a lot about like bodybuilding, or these exercises don't help you as much to achieve this, is always being specific will give you the biggest transfer. So doing the same or the most similar movement will help you more, but building muscle in different ways and different planes, and then learning to use that muscle to do the job will do exactly the same. It's just a bit of a different process. So you're not wasting time. Bodybuilding is not functional. It's you build muscle, and then it's just about learning how it plays together in different movements. So if you take a huge guy, I've seen Larry Wheels, for example. He did some specific work. He has a good feeling for his body. He's doing 90-degree handstand push-ups because he has a incredible strength and a lot of muscle. And this idea of functional, it's rather about learning to use the body. And it's not that just because you have muscle, you won't be able to do that. Actually, it will help you once you learn how to use it in a certain way.
Yeah, if you have spent a good amount of time in the gym doing strength training, doing bodybuilding, you have a leg up on other people to get to some calisthenics skills quicker. It's just simply a lot of it comes to like humbling yourself a bit, setting your ego aside and saying, okay, even though my shoulders are super strong, I'm going to have to take a few weeks, a few months to really learn handstand push-up technique and only do 1 rep, for on the wall, even though it feels like I should be able to bang out 8 here, humble yourself back a little bit and yeah, do the quality work.
Super good point. Because it's the people that get hurt because they're actually very strong. They put themselves in a position they're not used to, they're not conditioned to. And most people would just fall out of this position. They can kind of hold it, but they're not specifically strong in this range. And that's why I've tried this and I got hurt. So it's not for me. No, you need to just take 3 steps back, just as you said, beautiful, and go through the process step by step.
Yes. Cool. So we got pull up, we got pike push up. Those are going to be 2 very high bang for your buck calisthenics exercises that are going to build a lot of muscle, but also set foundation to do higher level skills in calisthenics as well. Any others, Denis?
Rather than the dip, I would take the push up. The dip is extremely great exercise to build muscle, to overload. A lot of people call it the squat of the upper body, but it's very technical. Depending on your anatomy, you really might not be built very well for dipping.
Who isn't built well for dipping?
In general, if you have quite a long humerus, for example, it's not great. The shorter, the better. Usually that does help a lot. Short humerus head, longer forearms is quite good. Then it depends on torso length. A longer torso isn't too great either. Then there is a lot of how mobile are you, like in shoulder extension, and a lot of little things that will differ from one person to another. How strong is your triceps? And for a lot of people, the movement feels really unnatural. A lot of people tend to elevate their shoulders a lot. Like most dips you see in the gym, they're not great. It's people like really begging to get hurt. That's why I don't recommend it. If it feels great for you, it's perfect. You had never problems with this exercise, great. It's a super good loading exercise to load, but most people would be better off simply doing push-ups, and push-ups are too easy is not true because you can load those as well. You can put weight on your back, you put on a weight vest, and if you don't have a weight vest, you set yourself up on a box and some dip bars. You attach the belt to your chest, for example, or a bit lower, and you can do weighted push-ups up to 40 kgs easily. And if those become too easy, you can use rings, which are an awesome tool, which allow you to get more stretching, go wider, work on stability as well until stability isn't your limiting factor there and you get strong at them. You can actually like almost do a fly movement when going up. Extremely great to build your chest. Like super good exercise for even just a power lifter. So very underrated exercise regarding chest development. Here, it's just about technique and learning how to depress your shoulder blades, stay quite open with your chest, not closing. Most people do push-ups and they just hit their anterior delt and really squeezing the most out of this exercise. We'll have an episode on the push-up as well. I would say we go into all the nitty-gritty details.
Just to give people an idea, what's your favorite setup for doing push-ups?
I would use a box that's high enough that you can hang your weights down from a belt. Usually like those typical, rogue boxes or so. They work perfectly. And then you can take the dip station that is in your gym, and instead of using it for dips, you put it lower on the rack, or you use some rings. You set them up exactly at the height of the box. So they're exactly as high as the box. And with the weights, it's good if you like manage to slide them up to the chest, because otherwise your core might be your limiting factor, which you don't want in push-ups. So the center of gravity is rather here on chest height. And shoulder depression, grip wide enough that it's not just triceps. Slightly flare out the shoulders, but not too much, which might feel uncomfortable for some. So find a setup that works. When you get nice and deep, So here on YouTube, it will be easier to show, but do not let your shoulders slide forward to just get more range of motion and just getting more stretch into your anterior delt, but make sure you're nicely depressed and actually get the stretch here. And when you go up, like think about pushing those bars together or those rings together. And that's a great setup. You'll feel your chest like you've probably never felt it before.
Yeah, amazing. You know, you do a lot of push-ups in your life. Switching to a variation like this, adding some weight, it's a whole new ball game. You know, you'll get some DOMs for a few days after. Push-ups, love it. Do you like the counterpart of doing rows for body weight movement?
Rows are awesome as well. Great starting point. If you're not ready for pull-ups, fantastic. Make sure the setup is good there. So here you can use some guidelines because a lot of people set up rows just as like randomly. The rings hang at a certain height. They go like, oh, nice. Let's do some rows. You can stand next to the rings. Make sure they're at elbow height. So the lowest part of the ring is at elbow height. Set your hips under the bar where they're hanging. Stretch out your feet, so keep your feet straight. This is, let's say, an intermediate difficulty. You can make them harder by bringing the ring down to wrist height. So when you stand next to them, always hips under the bar, and you can make them easier by either holding the rings at stomach height and bending your knees, or bending your knees at elbow height. So a few standards you can progress through over time. They're awesome. Make sure that you're moving your scapulas correctly. And one of the best assistance exercises to really learn the pull-up, because especially on rings, you have a certain freedom of movement. You understand what your scapulas are doing. And even though it's not exactly the same plane, you do still hit the same muscle for the most part. Those are great. And maybe the dragon flag for core, I think it's just fun. It's a cool exercise. It's fun. A lot of people for the core, they do these 8-minute, 10 million reps follow along videos. That's one of the things most people like to focus on and do. And rather than doing endurance work for your abs, there's still a muscle like every other, like other fiber type distribution for the most part, but actually working in lower rep ranges to give them another stimulus and grow them is awesome. And working on the dragon flag will give you that.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that a lot. I like the distinction of working the core just like any other, muscle group, that we're going to pick one exercise, maybe two exercises, and we're just going to get better at that, right? Rather than just doing tons and tons of reps. For some reason, when we work the core, we think it's different than the rest of the body. Okay, so we talked pull up, pike push up / handstand push up. We got push up, we got row, and we got dragon flag. I think those are like a very solid 5 exercises to add into your lifting routine, which is still going to build muscle if we do it the right way. And we're going to be setting like a very, very solid foundation if you do want to, say, go get that handstand push up in the future, or work on a front lever in the future, or whatever skill really attracts you there. Anything that you want to add to that, Denis?
Honestly, I think we said it all.
Okay, just for fun here to end, how about maybe a little bit of the classic Sthenics debunking energy into what are some calisthenics kind of flashy exercises that maybe aren't worth your time to start adding into your like lifting routine, right? And I don't want to say like there's anything bad. If something really interests you, then go do it, right? Like who are we to tell you not to? But just more of like what's not going to give you huge carryovers.
Where do I start? A lot of people love doing those headbangers where you hold the bar and you go away and you pull yourself in, and it's like you work your core and at the same time your back, and nah. I mean, yes, you're in a L sit and it looks impressive because you're like hanging and doing other stuff. And they say it works your bicep, but the angle you're working it at is not particularly great. I think good point we made is the abs routines. Like you're mostly wasting your time after a certain point on those because those are very much seen as calisthenics.
Maybe I'll ask you some specific ones. Like,
Yeah.
What do you think of archer push-ups, for instance? Would it be better, more worth your time just to get stronger at a weighted push-up like we described here?
Weighted push-up is more straightforward, easier to keep the same technique, more objective, and easier to load over time. So big 4 points there. The archer push-up, though, if you don't have weight available and you focus a lot on technique, can be great, but at a certain point there as well, you will be too strong for it. So actually, it may be one thing that's rather on the useless side. It's not useless, but like these typewriter pull-ups, typewriter push-ups, they look cool, like when you do them walking and stuff. But yeah, you're better off doing something that's easier to objectively measure. If it's fun, you love it, it's great, but it's not the greatest exercise of all time. It's not the secret to strength. The one arm push up is a tricky one because so much stability goes into play. You just shift your body a tiny bit more to one side, and it's much easier even than a well done archer push up. So these are things that might be cool to achieve as a little goal, but you can achieve them by doing a few sets, and that's it if you have a good stable weighted push-up.
A lot of the time you get certain things like this for free if you just get a lot stronger in the basic variation of what you're doing. Like you mentioned, doing the kind of archer side to side pull-ups or whatever, typewriter pull-ups, I guess you would call them. But if you just put more time into your weighted pull-up, then you could probably do those easily. And, you'll get possibly closer to whatever your goal is, like a muscle up or a one arm pull up or something like that.
Then, of course, the workout needs to be fun. We work out because it's fun. And if you enjoy it, if you love it, then go for it. I feel like my view of these things has become more, my goal is people pay me, so I get them to the goal. So I take the route that I know and think is best for them. But if they want to integrate these things into their plan, they're like, I love this. I'll I'll leave some space for them because enjoying, constantly doing it, sticking to it is the most important thing at the end of the day. You can have the most optimal workout in the world. If you don't enjoy it, what are you doing?
Yeah, yeah. Love that. I love that. I love that you're aware enough to point that out that, you've been coaching for a long time now. So you're finding the most efficient paths to get somewhere. But efficiency doesn't always equal motivation for the individual, right? So, if there's something really fun, like you want to really work on a back lever or, something like this, then I think, hey man, go have fun with it. And a lot of the time I like to think of these things as little like gateway skills, right? It's like skills that maybe don't have a whole bunch of carryover into other things, but you get this like satisfaction of figuring
Sense of
something out.
achievement. Yeah.
Exactly. Sense of achievement. There's some problem solving that you got to get from here to there. And then that just really kind of keeps your journey going in calisthenics or whatever type of movement space it is. And yeah, it's always good to have momentum to keep training.
I'm not a big fan of the headstand, even though for some people it's very nice to get confidence being with upside down. But yeah, the headstand or the crow or things like that, not too big of a fan. I feel like there's more straightforward ways, but very similar to all these exercises. And I for sure have a big bias in one direction there. So
I agree with you on the headstand. I will sometimes have people tell me they want to learn a handstand and they've been working on their headstand. And like my response is always like, you got to get on your hands soon, like sure, that's going to get you a little bit more comfortable with being upside down, but there's really not much carryover to a handstand. So, all right. I love it. I love it. This was fun. Any last words?
hope you're enjoying the podcast and keep going. If you're enjoying it, share it with your friends. Get some people to do calisthenics. And in the next episodes, we'll talk maybe a tiny bit more about the community things like finding people, like getting together, working out together, and all the advantages that gives you before going more nerdy on certain movements.
That sounds good. Yeah, I think that's our plan. I was at the Calisthenics Park just a few days ago, and there was this 54-year-old guy. I ended up chatting with him. He was from Spain. He was training. His daughter's in college here in Austin, so he was just visiting. He was holding full planche for a couple seconds. He was doing like high pull-ups like to his waist, like reps of 5, you know? And it was just so inspiring. I got to share it. It was just like, dude, you're 54, you're out here, you're killing it. Super humble guy too. He's like, "Oh, no, I'm not very good," you know? And I think that's the beauty of calisthenics is, you know, he's visiting from Spain and he can just go out to the park and, you know, do these awesome skills and yeah, have a good day.
Still stay fit. Yeah.
We will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for joining us today.